Hi everyone, can you hear me now? Yes, you can hear me. Great, amazing. So, welcome and thank you for being here. We are super impressed with how many people is online with us today and how many of you are interested in this specific topic. So before we start with the masterclass, I will make a brief introduction. I guess that most of you already know All Women and what we do here. But for those of you who are new in our community, All Women is an academy for women in tech. We are based in Barcelona, but we teach internationally. So we are training women in careers such as data analytics, data science, UX writing and content design, web development, product management, and of course UX UI design, which is kind of like the topic that is bringing us here today for this specific masterclass. So before I share the link for our websites in the chat, you can find it there. You can also find us on LinkedIn as All Women, on Instagram, All Women Tech. You can also find Diana Militano, who is our speaker today on LinkedIn if you like to connect with her. So we are hosting a UX UI bootcamp soon, just in a few weeks. So if any of you is interested in that, if anything that we are going to share today like resonates with your personal search, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. So what else? Well, besides the bootcamps, we are always creating events for our entire community. For example, this masterclass here today. The topic today is user journey, and Diana Militano, our speaker, is a teacher for the UX design bootcamp, and what she will share with us today is part of what she's teaching for the bootcamp as well. So Diana, thank you for being here, for agreeing to take part in this event, and for sharing part of your knowledge with our entire community. Really, thank you. Diana is, correct me if I'm wrong, a senior product designer at TravelPerk.
That's right.
So, yeah, she will be making around a 45-minute presentation. And after she finishes, we will have some time for Q&A. So you will see that you have an Ask a Question button on your screen. We will try to cover as many questions as possible. There's a lot of people connected today, so we'll make our best. You can also participate in the chat. So if you have any comments, inquiries, or anything that you'd like to share, you can also do that over there. And just one more thing before we start is that, yes, since we have a big audience, we wanted to make something different or something additional for this event today, and Sketch, the software company that's a partner of All Women, is giving away 2 licenses for our audience today. So just by being here connecting, you will be a part of a raffle which will take place tomorrow. So maybe tomorrow you will get an email with a free license for Sketch. So I think I said everything that I wanted to. So now I will give the floor to Diana. She will start with her presentation. Remember, you can drop your questions in the chat or in the Ask a Question button, but we will get to them most likely at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's probably the most used sentence to begin a call these days. Okay, so well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and thank you everybody for joining this session. So just a quick introduction. Well, as Daniela said, I'm Diana. I work at TravelPerk, which is a startup here in Barcelona. So I'm based in Barcelona, even if I'm from Italy, and I have been working with All Women for a year and a half now. So I'm teaching in the UX UI bootcamp. And so today, of course, I'm here to talk about user journeys. And I know some of you probably are already in the UX field. but I could see that from the list of participants that actually not all of you are designers, or maybe they work in different fields. But that's great. That's actually a great thing, because this tool that we're gonna look at today is not necessarily something that only designers can use, but it's something that can be applied in many different fields, like marketing, or if you are a product manager, or even if you don't necessarily work in product, but you work more with customers instead. So that's I hope this is going to be useful for you as well. So I am gonna share my screen. Let's see. Okay, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so a little bit of what we're gonna do today. So first of all, we're gonna talk in general about user journey and try to understand what they are and what they look like. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story on how I actually, what my experience was with user journey. And then we're gonna get a little bit more hands-on and see how you build a user journey map. What are the techniques to do that, and just spoiler alert, it's very easy to do. So hopefully what you're learning today is something that you can apply right away tomorrow. It's not like rocket science. Is going to be very easy. And then we're going to go through some do's and don'ts about user journey, when it's good to use them and when it's actually better to use something else. And as Danny said, we're going to try to make it a little bit more interactive at the end. So I'm going to talk for a bit, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay. So let's go. Let's talk about what user journeys are. And I would like to tell you a little bit about my story, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. So when you are a UX designer, you use like a lot of tools. If you think about UX design, maybe you can think about wireframes, user persona, sketches, and all these kind of tools. And user journey is also one of them. But I think user journey is actually probably the ultimate tool of a UX designer. It's probably one of the most important, if not the most important one. So I have a background in graphic design. So I wasn't working as a UX designer when I started. I studied visual design, and at the beginning of my career, I was living in a city where Milan in Italy, where the tradition of design is very important, and especially when it comes to visuals and interior design. So it wasn't really my thing. I actually wanted to design, do interaction design, and work on web and mobile applications. So I started to get some interest in UX design. But what I realized when I was trying to, get experience with that, is that a lot of times UX design is seen as doing wireframe and doing something that is still focused on the design of the screen. So maybe you will do that with lower definition, maybe you will do wireframes and sketches and not high fidelity mockups, but it's still really much based on screens sometimes. But I knew there was something more. I was sure there was something more, and I wanted to learn the tools on how I could become a little bit more abstract and learn about UX design in that sense. And when I started working with all women, I realized that that's actually it's something that happened to many people there, especially when they come from graphic design. They arrive to the UX design field and they're asking, but how do I actually become more experience oriented? How do I design an experience of a user rather than like a set of screens one next to the other? So I as I said at the beginning, I was mainly working as a UI designer, looking at icons and layouts, and I was missing these tools to do something more. And I started to become familiar with this tool when I, a few years later, when I joined this company where we had a team with different designers, so UI designer and UX designers. And there was this UX designer who was working with me and was presented one of his work, and he basically presented something that looked like this. It's not, of course, the original artifact, but it was similar to this. And that, like, there I understood that there was exactly what I was looking for, like a tool that wasn't focused on the screen, but was looking at the overall experience. So basically, what this was, it was just a document that had describe a scenario and describe a user. Okay, it's called the persona, and then it had a table below, and the table was structured like this. So basically, you had a description of user actions in a chronological order. So it was looking at a specific feature of our application and describing the user action step by step. Then there was another row in this table with all the pain points. So for every action that the user was taking, it was mapping to something that the user wasn't happy with. It could be a missing feature, it could be a feature that wasn't working, or something that wasn't working as the user expected. And the important part was that it was mapped to all the actions. And then finally, there was a final row where they describe the opportunities. So given this action that the user is doing and given this pain point that they are experiencing, what can we do to actually solve this problem? What are the design ideas that we can bring to the table? And I thought that it was great, and I thought, okay, let's investigate a little bit more about this tool. Maybe I can use that as well. And why I thought this was great? Well, first, because describing the user actions, it means that I could understand better the context. So not just the screens that the user was going through, but also what was this user trying to do? What were the other maybe websites the user was interacting with? What are all the actions that they're trying to do? Then connected to that, understanding the problems and understanding them very well, not just maybe looking at a layout that wasn't working and moving buttons around, but I want to understand what's happening there, that it's not really, really working. And then finally, thinking about solution. And not just thinking about solution using my intuition, but referring this to things that were actually happening in the real life of the user. And that's ultimately what the UX designer does. So I realized at this point that what I was doing before was pretty much the last part, and I wasn't even doing it very well. I was just probably just relying on my intuition. And this way, now I had a very clear picture of what the context was, the user problem was, and I could think about solution in a better way, basically. So given this, I like to give this definition about what a user journey map is. And first of all, is a visualization, which is, I think, the key part. But it's the visualization of how a user uses a product over time. And I highlighted those three words: how, user, and time, and because I think they are also key parts, and we're going to see why they are key parts in a second. Okay, so let's go to the hands-on part. How do we actually build them? So if you try to make a Google search online and try to search for user journey templates, I can guarantee you that you're going to be overwhelmed by the results. You're going to see a lot of templates, you're going to see a lot of examples, and they all look very, very different between each other. Some are very graphical, they use a lot of images. Other have some kind of content, other have different kind of content, and it almost feels like there is not one right way of doing that. And actually that happens very often in the UX field. There are a lot of tools that people kind of reinterpret in different ways using different templates. But the reality is that there's never like one size fit all tool. So the good thing about all these kind of artifacts is that you can adapt them according to your project. But if you look at all those examples and you go and analyze them in details, you actually find out that they all match the same structure. So actually they're all the same. They just have a very different visual representation and they can have different content inside. But if you think about the table that we saw at the beginning with some sort of matrix structure, they all fall back to that. And we're going to see why in a second. So let's imagine that we want to create a user journey now of we are a startup and we want to create a competitor app for Uber or Cabify for people in Spain. So the first thing that we do, if we want to design a user journey map of the experience of this application user, we're going to go to a whiteboard, and it can be a virtual whiteboard, it can be a wall in your office, or it can be a piece of paper. Everything is fine. Then our first decision is who's the actor, who's the person that what story are we telling, and who's the protagonist of this story. And it's usually always one. You shouldn't be telling the story of two different actors in this user journey map. It's always one. How do you choose this actor? You usually pick one of your personas or archetype. So we're not going to go into the details of what a persona or archetype is, because it's a very complex topic on its own. But if you're not familiar with this terminology, I suggest you to have a look on books or on Google on articles and read about personas or archetypes, because it's actually one of the most important thing in the UX designer field. So, but just to sum it up, it's a persona usually is a typical user of your application, someone that does something, and we give this person a name just to keep it always fresh in our mind. Okay, so let's assume that we have Alex, and Alex, she's a girl coming back from a party with friends. Okay, that's our user. And the second step that we want to take is defining a time frame. And that's, again, a very, very important part. We're going to go into the details of how to define this time frame in a second. But the important thing that you need to do at this stage is that everything that happens on a customer journey map happens in a chronological order. So you're going to map everything that starts at some point in the life of this user and then ends. And you define clearly what this beginning point is and what this finish point is. That's very important. Okay, then we want to map all the actions that this user is taking. In this case, as you can see, we just map the whole journey from I actually start to I need something. There's a trigger, so I need to go home, and then we map all the steps that this person will take to actually get their goal satisfied, so to go home safely. And as you can see from the examples, we're not just mapping the interaction that the user is having with the application, so with a mobile phone, but we also mapping the context where Alex is. So, for example, she wants to go home after drinks with friends. That doesn't still involve the phone and the application. She waits at a pickup point. Maybe she puts her phone in the pocket. Doesn't matter. It's something that we need to map because it's something that is happening in the context of the user, and that's very important for us to know. So in the actions row, you will put all those aspects of the user journey. And then you create, after you finish with your actions, you create what I call swim lanes. Basically are different things that you want somehow to map related to those actions, categorized for some categories that you can choose. So there is not a fixed format at this stage. You can do whatever you want based on what you need for your project. I've put here some very common examples that you often find in user journey maps, but we're going to see that there are actually many more things that you can do as well. So, for example, happy moments. I'm mapping here for each action that the user is taking, what are the things that are working well for them. For example, Alex is very happy that she can use her location, so she doesn't need to type. Or when she pays, she doesn't need to bring cash or a card because payment is automatically done through the phone. And that's an important part that you want to map because it's telling you what are the things that you shouldn't change. So, for example, if the location, let's look at another example. I can see how much time I need to wait. So if that's a happy moment and you know it's something that's working well with the user, don't take it away. Or if you are introducing a new feature on that screen, don't make the waiting time very small, because that's something that user like to see. Then another category that is very, very popular, and it's probably one of the most important one, is the pain points. So you want to map all the actions to all the actions where your application is somehow failing, or your product, your service is not performing as it should. For example, if you look at the confirm pickup location, my location isn't precise, or the phone asks me to access my location all the time. Okay, so every time I open the app, I get this request. That's probably a bug that our developer still didn't fix. Maybe, I don't know. We map it there, and so we know that it's there and it exists. Or for example, when Alex pays, she's very annoyed by the fact that they charge her extra for waiting time, and that's a very low moment in the experience of the user. So it's something that we probably want to look after. So this is the area where you basically map all the problems that the users are having. Another very popular category is emotions, and you will find that if you look for examples, that's where designers get a lot creative in representing the emotions. You can find maybe charts with ups and downs, or emojis, like in this case, or pictures, quotes. They can find you can represent these how you want. And I know sometimes it can feel like, okay, that's maybe not so useful. Why am I mapping emotion? But actually, it's very important, because if you combine it with the pain points, you can understand how severe maybe a problem is. For example, if you look at the two examples that we saw before, if the phone asks me to access my location every time I open the app, okay, it's a little bit annoying for the user because they need to tap every time. But as you can see from the emoji that we put there, yeah, I might be a little bit confused, but it's not blocking me from moving on, or it's not making me feel like it's a really bad experience. It's just a little bit more annoying. Instead, if we look at they charge me for extra for waiting time, that's where as a user I'm really, really annoyed, and that's something that shouldn't happen. And maybe I'm not going to use the app again because last time you actually charged me and you were not transparent about these extra the waiting time charges. So the fact that we're using emotions here, it's going to help us to understand what should we prioritize, what is more important, and should we address ASAP. And finally, another category that you will often see is it's called opportunities, and it's where you start mapping your ideas, things that you could do to improve the experience. And for example, here they charge me for extra for waiting time. Well, maybe we should better clarify waiting costs at the beginning where we are actually waiting, or maybe we should have our location a little bit more precise, so we ensure that people actually go to the waiting point. So we can put all the ideas that we have there, and we can kind of brainstorm things. Imagine that if you didn't have all of this, and you were just sitting in front of your a piece of paper on a whiteboard, and you would need to sketch screens. You would miss out a lot. You will miss all this information, and it would be harder to actually generate ideas and the right ideas, and prioritize those ideas. So that's when this matrix becomes very powerful, I think. Okay, so we saw a few categories, but let's look at some examples to see how other people are actually doing that. Okay. So this is an example from the USA.gov website. It's a case study. And as you can see, they map the emotion a little bit more with more creativity than me. So they had smiley faces or not so smiley faces, green and red, and they have quotes, for example. Well, not quotes, descriptions of the emotion with a chart that describes the ups and downs, which is, I think, it's very super intuitive to see. But what I like about this journey map is the description of the different touch points. So as you can see, the whole experience starts with a friend, with Linda chatting with a friend. so in person, offline, and then it follows up on Google. Then after going on Google, searching and finding the right website, then you land on the website that we're actually owning the experience of. If we weren't mapping the previous part before the website, if we were just focusing on the website part, we would probably miss out an important step, which is everything starts with a Google search. So the moment we realize that everything starts with a Google search, we also realize that we probably need to involve the marketing department, because marketing actually needs to ensure that they have content that gets on Google, that gets indexed on Google, or we need to. Sorry, Daniela, you were about. Yes.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. We have some people in the chat saying that they cannot read the text. I was wondering if it's possible for you to zoom in. Is that an option for you?
The text of the whole presentation or just the screenshot?
I mean the post-its from the previous slides and
right,
also this one.
Okay. I'm not sure I can. Let me try.
Otherwise, I'm sure that we can share afterwards those slides.
I can share the slides, yes. I don't know if it's a little bit better.
It's a little bit blurry and small, but maybe I can share it right now with everyone so that they can take a look in their own computers.
Okay.
Let me see if I can do that.
Okay, but I would say on this one, it's not important you read the text, actually. It's important just that you see those icons here and these icons here. So don't worry too much about the text. So what is important in here is that the fact that we're mapping the different touch points helped us understanding that the experience starts on Google. And if the experience starts on Google, it means that we need to look after how our website performs on search engines. And it means that, for example, if I am a designer, I know nothing about how get our website on the first results of Google. So I would need to actually get someone from marketing involved and make sure that they are creating content and indexing our web pages. So the only way I could realize that if I map that part of the experience and I included that in my user journey. So and then again, the experience continues over the phone. So it means that maybe the content that I have on the website should be up to date with the message that customer care gives on the phone, and that's how you actually look after the whole experience. So it's not just focus on your website, your product, but the whole ecosystem that your service is about. Okay, again, you're probably not going to read the screen here. Don't worry, it's not important. I'm going to describe it to you. What I like about this user journey is that so here you will read the word thinking and here the word feeling. So they, in this user journey map, they were very detailed about the user emotions and described everything that people are thinking and feeling. I don't know if you ever heard about Empathy Map, but Empathy Map is another tool that sometimes you can use to map the basically what users think and feel and say, and they kind of embedded this into the user journey. So they, for every step of the journey, they are describing what are they thinking, what are they feeling, and not just what they say, basically. Okay, and this is another one that I like because of those two last points. So one is, I don't know if you can read it, one is called KPIs and the other one is ownership. So far, we just look at how user journey map are mapping basically what the user is trying to do and everything related to the user experience. But they are also great to map what us as a team are going to do in terms of development and design and operation. So for example, KPIs, which stands for key performance indicators, we're mapping all the the metrics that we want to track and the numbers that we want to impact on every step of the user journey. So for example, if we, let's going back to our Uber example, if we improve the visibility of, or if we fix the bug of the location issue, which caused the user to be a little bit more annoyed, what metrics do we expect to impact? Maybe more users actually requesting for a cab, I don't know. So we can track all those data in our journey map. And then another one that this example is using is ownership. So for every step of the journey, we can map what is the department that is going to work on this on this feature, for example. Maybe for the Google search, we're going to map this to marketing, and for the application itself, we're going to map it to the product team and the design team and the development team. And that's something that you can use internally with your team to better organize your work, basically. So that's another thing that you can do with user journey mapping. So as you can see, you can create as many categories as you like based on what you need to do and what you need to map, and you can get as creative as you want. The important thing is that you keep a chronological order, you choose one actor, and you map everything to the actions that the user is taking. Those are the 3 key points. Then the rest, it's all how you your creativity, basically. Okay, so the screen is not changing for me. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so where do we find all those data that we're putting in journey mapping? Mainly from research. So if you have data that you can look at about your product, if you have interviewed some users, maybe because it's a new product that you are designing. So everything should ideally come from research. Sometimes you can do user journey mapping based them on hypotheses. So maybe you're designing a product that doesn't exist and you want to map the ideal experience. You're gonna map something and you don't have information about. That's fine, as long as you are communicating to your team that what you're writing on the user journey map, you don't know if it's true or not, but you're gonna find it out later. So as long as it's clear where the data is coming from, everything is fine. Okay, so going back to the original definition, a user journey map is the visualization of how a user uses a product over time. We talk about the user, the actor, we talk about the how, describing the actions and the swim lanes, but we still haven't talked about time. Okay. So let's make this example. Let's imagine that you're not a designer anymore, you are a photographer, and you've been tasked to take a picture of a boat sailing in the sea. You can take both pictures. They're both fine. They both represent exactly this. In the first one, you're gonna see a lot about the context. You can see, you can guess that's not the Atlantic Ocean, probably the Mediterranean Sea. That's a big boat. The weather conditions are fine. Maybe it's summer. I don't know. You can get a lot of information about the context, but you cannot see, for example, the logo on the boat, the material of the boat. You cannot see if the boat is empty or if it's very crowded. There are all the details. You cannot guess them from this picture. The other picture is the exact opposite. You don't know anything about where you are, the weather condition, nothing. The only thing that you can see is the detail of the wood of the boat. So with user journey, when you're deciding what you should map, so remember when we said at the beginning, the time frame with a beginning and an end. So the scope of the user journey, the way you decide how much detail it should be, it's exactly like in a picture. You decide how much you want to zoom in or how much you want to zoom out. So if you zoom out, it's going to be like more or less the first example. You won't catch a lot of details, but you will see the experience overall. If you zoom in, you will miss out the experience overall, but you will see all the details. So when do you use which? So you're going to zoom out most of the time when you are designing something new, like a new product, a new feature, there's a new use case, there's a new actor. So when something is very new, then you want to understand the context and you want to be a little bit more high level. You're not ready to go into the details. So you're going to design a user journey like the one that we saw before, very high level. no details. You zoom in when you want to make smaller improvements, and you will create a very detailed scope. And usually that happens when your product or service is already solid. So maybe you have you're not designing the competitor of Uber, but you are designing Uber. So you are designing an Uber, and what you want to do, for example, like in this case, you want to improve the experience of the confirming the pickup and drop off address. So as you can see in the example, well, you cannot read it, sorry, but um, it's you're gonna describe all the details of the experience. So at the beginning, you start by saying the user opens the home page, then they tap on enter destination, then they verify the pickup address is correct, then they type the destination, the suggestions appear. So you're going to describe all the smaller interaction and the micro interaction about the journey, and that's why so all the details. But again, because you're describing the details, you don't know the context. You don't know if the user is waiting for the cab on the street, or if they are at home, if they're going to the airport. You don't know all those details or all those context. Okay. So last part, do's and don'ts. When should we use user journeys, and when shouldn't we do that? So user journeys are great when you want to understand a little bit more about the context, like we said at the beginning. Maybe you want to visualize the user actions. Maybe you want to map them to their pain points, and maybe you want to understand the different channels they use, like in the example we saw from the government website, the USA government website. They want to see when they go online and offline. So when you want to understand all those points of the experience, user journey are a great tool. They're very good also for communication. So imagine that you've done user research and you want to communicate all your findings to your team. Then you can use user journey mapping. Instead of writing a report, you can communicate this by describing what the user does and what the user, where the user is, the experience is failing. And it's very visual. It's good for people to read, especially with people that maybe are in a rush and they cannot read a lot document. It's very engaging. You can make it a little bit more fun with some, if you have, for example, visual design background, you can make it a little bit more graphic. So it's a great tool for that. Many offices, for example, they print out their journey mapping of their main product, and they put them in the office. We had that, for example, in my company before COVID. And yeah, it's a tool that is very engaging for people. And the same goes if you have formulated hypotheses. So you believe something is true, you map what you believe on the user journey map, and you want everybody to be aligned with what you're trying to find out, basically. It's great when you want to ideate. You can easily, like we said before, when you have all the actions mapped out and all the pain points, then you can write down all the ideas that you have, and it's just very easy to fill in the gaps in the experience if you have a map to refer to. It's much easier than just again looking at a screen and thinking about ideas. It's much better when you have everything clear in front of your eyes. And then there are a great collaboration tool. There is something that is called user journey mapping workshop, where basically you sit down with your team and you try to build the map together. You start with the actions, and then with the action you get everybody to think about all the other swim lanes. And it becomes very useful when you then want to do the ideation part. Why is that good? Because first of all, it's a way of engaging the rest of the team with what you're doing. But most importantly, because you can get different point of views. So if you are a designer in a team, you will probably have one point of view. But if you start getting in your team someone from sales, someone from customer care, from account management, and different different actors, different stakeholders, they will bring in different points of view you couldn't think of, and then your user journey mapping will become richer and richer, and you're more likely to go towards the right direction and design the right thing. So that's an example of a user journey mapping workshop that we run at TravelPerk before before COVID, of course. And we mapped actually the whole experience of the whole platform. We divided in, split up in teams, and we tried to map everything. And the result was actually what I was telling you before. We printed it out and put it in the office. And then 2 months later, COVID hit, and those maps are then in the office for nobody to look at. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay, so when shouldn't you use user journey mapping? When it's not the right thing to do. So you shouldn't be using them when you're trying to create a document for technical specification. So remember that user journey mapping is a tool to understand context, to understand user goals and needs. So it's a lot of, it sits on the ideation side of it and the understanding side of it. When you are writing technical specification, you already know how things should work, so you don't need to understand. And that's not the best tool to actually do that. There are other tools that you can use. One of them is flowcharts. So something that looks more like this. So when do you know if it's a technical specification or not? When you start seeing a lot of arrows and things branching out and a lot of details, that's probably when you want to use a flowchart rather than a user journey tool. And the difference is that flowcharts are not linear and they don't focus on pain points, opportunities, happy moments. They just describe the thing the way it is and the way it works. Connected to this, you don't want to use user journey when you want to map interaction precisely. So journey maps are linear, okay, because they move, they describe something that happens over time. But if you think about real life interaction, they're never linear. Think about the Uber example. When you open the app and you want to request a cab, yes, you can start by putting your pickup address and then follow up with a destination. But you could also do the other way around. So in real, if you really want to describe this interaction precisely, you would probably have two different branches. You open the app and you can whether confirm the pickup address or confirm the destination. In user journey map, this division doesn't matter. You just pick one route, you pick the first one, and that's okay, and you go on with that because you don't need to be precise. If you want to be precise, again, maybe you need to use a flowchart and do some technical specification instead. You need to be very careful when you have a complex product that you're working with. This is, for example, true for tools, professional tools, or business to business tools. Not all of them, but when they're very professional. Why? Because some products are designed so that they can support an infinite number of use cases, and it means that they have an infinite user journey. So sometimes you just cannot zoom out like we saw before. You cannot make a user journey of the whole picture. Think about something like Word. Can you just make a user journey of the whole experience? You probably can't. There are so many things that you can do. So maybe what you want to do is zooming in and have some smaller user journeys. Maybe you want the user journey of saving a file, emailing a file, printing. There are different ones, but you cannot have the whole, zoomed out big picture. So always define when you have a complex product, precise scope. And then if you really need to zoom out, maybe you can use Empathy Map, and which is probably a better tool. And then finally, don't use them for map web architecture. It's simple. User journey have the core of user journey is time. It's interactions that happens over time. So if you want, for example, map the architecture of a website, it doesn't work because it doesn't have time. It's just different pages, and maybe you want to use a sitemap instead. Okay, so just to recap, what do we say? User journey are visualization of how the user uses a product over time, with the time component being kind of the key that distinguishes these tools from others. Okay. How do we build them? We define an actor, we define the time, we decide the scope of the time, zooming in and zooming out, and then we create all the swim lanes and the actions and the other categories that we like. And when do we use them? When we want to understand, when we want to communicate something with the team, when we want to do some ideation, and when we want to collaborate and doing some user journey mapping workshop together with our team. When we don't use them is when we want to do text specification, when we want to create non-linear interactions, when we have a complex product we need to be careful, and for web architectures. And that's it for today. Maybe we can go for questions.
Yes, Diana, we have a lot of questions. So for everyone in the chat that has been asking, if you can drop your question in the Ask a Question button, it will be great, because over there everybody can vote. So I will get to the most voted questions first. So first one, how much quality research typically needs to be done in order to acquire accurate insights, like pain points, opportunities, and so on? And then in the same question, what does the process look like when synthesizing the research findings for the user map?
Okay, so how much quality research? I don't think there is like one answer for all the use cases. It really depends on the product. It really depends on your team. It really depends on the speed you're moving at. So if you are moving fast, maybe you don't have a lot of time to do a lot of qualitative research. Usually the key is a good balance between doing as much research as you can at the beginning, and then validate afterwards what you couldn't research later on. So there is a book that is called Just Enough Research, which actually is kind of it's talking about this point, and the idea is that you do continue validation. So you can do a user journey map with whatever findings you have from qualitative research. You can drop their assumptions and hypotheses if you like, as long as you communicate that what is a research finding and what is an hypothesis, and that's okay. Maybe you can even have a swim lane that is hypothesis and it's separate from the rest. And what does the process like when synthesizing the research findings from the user map? So I can tell you what I usually do. I like to work a lot with affinity mapping. So basically, I take all my notes from interviews and user testing. I translate them into sticky notes, and then I group similar things. And then from there, I basically understand what are the main topics, and then from those topics and from those groups, I translate them into the journey and the time. So it's user affinity mapping works very well.
Amazing, thank you, Diana. Second question, can you share how to map out an end-to-end customer journey versus a focused customer journey?
Okay, so I was trying before, but I don't think you can see that because of the Zoom.
Everyone has the presentation now. I shared the link to the presentation so they can follow you.
Fantastic. Okay, maybe I can just describe a little bit the different example. So an end-to-end customer journey, taking the example of the cab and Uber or Kpis, I start with I want to go home, and I finish with I get home. And in the meantime, you describe the key points of your experience. Getting the address, waiting for searching for a ride, waiting for the cab, getting into the cab, travel, and get home, pay and get home. And those are the key points. When you want something that is focused, you pick one of those key points. Actually, you take one frame and then you zoom in. And for example, we said one of the frame was deciding the address. So you can zoom in into defining the address, and then you can map all the interaction. And then that's where you probably will describe all the clicks that you do on the screen. I clicked on the address field. Suggestions came up. It asked me for the location. I click on the location. Then I do the same thing for the destination and so on. I hope you don't hear a lot of noise coming from outside.
We can hear it, but it's just like background. We can also hear you perfectly.
Okay, sorry.
This is working remotely, yeah.
So yeah, the difference is is basically that. One, you will find that the end-to-end customer journey is usually an experience of where you also look at the context and not just the product itself, the digital product. So you go offline as well, whilst the focused customer journey usually is within the screen, and it maps the interaction and the smaller interaction. So usually, most of the time, that's the difference.
Perfect. So next one, what advice do you have for user journey mapping workshops? Are there any specific steps you like to take to guide a group to create this map?
Okay, so I always recommend to start with something that is set and defined, which could be, in this case, the scenario. So you will usually do a user journey map because you know what you're trying to solve, you know the context, right? So maybe you know if you're working on a specific feature or if you're just designing a new product. So come to the journey mapping workshop if you are facilitating it with an idea of the scope, so the time, and with an idea of the user. And that's a good way of getting everybody on the same page. I did in the past a workshop where actually that wasn't clear, and we spent a lot of time of, okay, but should we include these or should we include that? And there was a lot of discussion. So if you come with that clear, it's gonna make things a little bit smoother. And then once you have that defined, I would start with mapping all the actions because it's simple and everybody agrees on that. It's not like you cannot have opinions on that. And then you can follow up with, and everybody can map this. Maybe you can facilitate by being the person that actually puts the sticky notes on the wall. And then everybody can just jump in and saying, okay, this happens before, this happened next, and it can be very collaborative. And even if it's a little bit disorganized, that's fine. The moment you go into the pain points and the opportunities, it's much better if you step away a second from the journey map. You let people brainstorm pain points and brainstorm ideas, and then you facilitate the action of putting them into the journey map. So you, for example, you pick one sticky note of a pain point, and you say, okay, that happens in this part of the journey map, let's put it there. This happens in this other part of the journey map, let's put it there. And that can be a way of doing that. So, and another thing that it's important, if you have research material, share it beforehand so they can read it before, and they can come to the journey mapping with information.
Great. So next one, as a freelancer, how could you manage a journey map?
As a freelancer, okay, yeah. That's nice because you don't have a team, right, to work with. So if you have research done, you can do it yourself. It doesn't have to be collaborative. Just take the information that you have and make a journey map like we did. You can make a simple one because it's just for yourself. You don't need to be creative and making like nice visuals and so on, and use it for yourself to ideate. So the same way it's useful for a team where they can visualize pain points and problems and so on, you can do it for yourself. I did it many times. I've created journey maps for myself and nobody ever seen them, and that was okay. You can also use it to share it with your client and to understand, make them understand, for example, the motivations of certain choices in your design. And maybe it's an element, something that you can share with them, and make them visualize your process. But again, the key part is that you have some research material you can start from and create it from there and use it for yourself.
So now I'm going to read one that is actually not a question, but here someone says, looking forward to meeting the other aspiring UX designers and specifically the fellow women in the field. So I encourage you to share your LinkedIn profile if you want to in the chat, so we can also do some networking over here. And next question by Hamad is, are data points based on assumptions or are these based on user testing?
It can be both. ideally from user testing. So every time if you have research material, use the research material. That takes the priority over everything. If you don't have research material, try to convince someone to get research material. Go with assumptions and hypotheses only where it's really not possible to get information from research, or maybe when you just don't have enough from research, but make sure that you validate those later on. So at some point, research will come. It's just a matter of, does it come before or does it come a little bit later in the process? So I would say both. And again, make it very clear where this is coming from. I've sometimes used a dedicated swim lane called Hypotheses. And that was just, it was super clear that whatever was in that part of the user journey was something that I didn't know about. And I was just thinking myself.
So Diana, I know that you said that we were not getting into persona in this masterclass, but we have a question about persona, so maybe you can just say something quickly about it. So the question is, how do you set a persona? What is the requirement to set a persona?
Okay, so again, persona is nothing but a summary of your user research. It's a way of presenting your findings in a way that is clear and that can be used many times in the process. The way you basically do it, you summarize all your findings into a profile of a person. In the past, personas used to be a very rich document with a lot of information. You used to have a name, a picture, a biography, details about, I don't know, goals and needs and income, and really a lot of information. Now, designers tend to not use so many information because they could actually bias your design. You tend to just describe what this kind of person is trying to do, so the needs, the goals, and what are the main pain points. So usually it's a summary of all those things, and you represent them in the form of a profile with a face, a name, and those information. It's useful because then when you communicate with people, it's very easy to say, oh, but Alex would never do that, or Alex wouldn't need that thing. Yeah, no, Alex wouldn't, but John would. So it's very easy for them to have conversation with other people about about your users, basically. So it's a summary of user research and needs, goals, and problems.
Okay, I think that we have time to get into a couple more questions. So next one is, what tools can we use to map user journey? I know that someone in the chat was recommending Miro, for example.
Yeah, Miro is very good. I usually use that. Figma now has a new feature that is called Figma Jam, where you can do, it's a basic whiteboard that you can use as well. And then I know there are a lot of other whiteboards tools out there that are very similar to Miro. They're all great. And also you can use a real whiteboard with, in real life with sticky notes or pen and paper, everything you feel most comfortable with. Miro is good because you don't have the problem with user journey is that they stretch a lot horizontally, and Miro doesn't have a limit. You can just go on and on. Whilst if you use something like Photoshop or Illustrator or PowerPoint, it's a little bit harder. You have the constraints of the page. On Miro, you don't have them, and on Figma Jam, you don't have either. In the past, I've used Miro to do the drafting of the user journey map, and then I recreated that on Figma just so I can print it out a little bit nicely. It depends on what you are feeling most comfortable with.
Amazing. So for everybody that is asking if this session is being recorded, yes, it is being recorded, and it will be available for rewatch right after the session finishes today. So don't worry about it. It will be in our Crowdcast channel. So one more question. How the process changed due to COVID limitations? Did you go digital with products such as Miro? If yes, do you feel the quality of the team workshop for journey mapping is truly equal to the previous processes?
So I think that something has improved and something is worse. I think the doing a journey mapping on Miro is much easier than doing it in real life because it's so much easier to move post-its around and sticky notes around. Whilst on real life, imagine you have a row of sticky notes that go on for 2 meters, and then you realize, oh, actually, there is this whole part of the interaction that we didn't include, and then you need to start manually to move all the sticky notes. It's a little bit annoying. So on Miro, that's much easier. You can include new things, improve it. It's just much easier in that sense. What I think it's less effective is the collaboration part. Well, not the collaboration part. If you want to create a user journey collaborative, because if you're doing a user journey workshop, for example, when I did it, we sit down in a room for the whole day. You cannot do this on Zoom. On Zoom, the maximum time that you can keep a team together is a couple of hours, maybe. So you will need to move parts of the process asynchronously. So maybe you cannot present your research. Maybe you cannot. What else you cannot do? You cannot. You can present your research, and you will need to share slides, and you don't know if people are going to read them or not. You can't define the persona on the spot. Collaborative, you need to come there already with some ideas. So you need to take away all the things that you can do, so you make the workshop a little bit shorter, and I would say 2 hours maximum. So parts of it ends up not being collaborative, or you need to split it on different days, which makes it longer. But the user journey mapping itself, I think it's actually easier on digital.
Thank you. It's super nice to see that everybody is sharing their LinkedIn profiles in the chat. Even we have some job opportunities in the chat right now. We're gonna get to the last 2 questions for the session. So, what do we do when an activity can happen through different channels or touch points?
Okay, so if it's the same activity, like, well, I cannot think of an example. I don't know, booking, imagine that you want to book a train, and this can happen on the phone, on the website, or on over the phone or in person. Then I think you have 2 options. Whether you're doing a very zoomed out version of your map, so you're going to have one action, which is book a train, and then you're in the swim lane, you have a swim lane that is dedicated to the touch point, and then you're going to have all the 4 touch points described there. That's an option. The second option is that you're zooming in and you're doing a very detailed user journey map, and maybe you do a user journey map per touch point. This is the experience on web, this is the experience on mobile, this is the experience on in person. So you can do those 2 different things. The key there is how zoomed in and zoomed out you want to be. If you're zooming out, probably it doesn't matter that they are on different touch points as long as all those touch points are there. If you're zooming in, then the individual touch points gets importance, I think.
So I just shared Diana's LinkedIn profile as well if you want to connect with her. And now we will get to the last question, that is, what is the difference between affinity or journey mapping and mind mapping, though both are bursting or are for bursting our ideas?
Okay, so affinity mapping, I usually use them in different contexts. To me, affinity mapping is a tool to group things that are disorganized. Usually I have sticky notes. They can be notes from research. They can be suggestions from a workshop, suggestions from the team. But to me, they are information that they are disorganized. And affinity mapping is a way of grouping things that are similar. So I actually take post-its that are probably the same idea or the same topic, and I put them into clusters, and then I give this cluster a title. So that's an affinity mapping exercise. A journey mapping exercise is something that is describing a user journey through time. So things don't have to be similar. It's just they have to be in chronological order. The mind mapping, I think the mind mapping is just a way of connecting things together, but still in a very not precise way, and just getting concept together. So I would say affinity mapping and mind mapping are a way of organizing information that are disorganized, but the journey mapping is something that is more related to the user experience, and how the user experience evolves over time.
All right, so I believe that we have arrived to the end of this masterclass. I just want to say thank you again, Diana, for sharing all this knowledge. It was like super clear, and thank you everyone in the audience for the interaction. The questions were amazing, and I love that you were super active in the chat. So we are hoping to stay in touch with you. Again, you can find us as All Women on LinkedIn. You can also follow us on Instagram as All Women Tech, and you are always welcome to send us an email if you have any questions, any doubts, or anything that you want to share with the All Women community. So again, big applause to Diana, everyone from home. Yeah, that's it. I don't know, Diana, if you want to add anything else.
No, I just want to say thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody to join. And yeah, I hope it was helpful. And if you have any other questions, or if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, feel free to.
Yeah, we hope to see everyone in our next events. So bye bye. Have a good night, evening, depending on where you're based. Bye bye.
Bye.